Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video on Superman Lois Season 4. Today we're going to be doing my review and breakdown for the series finale of the entire show. What an episode it was so emotional. The first part was action-packed, but the back half of the episode was literally just pure tears. And it was a tough watch, but it was bittersweet in the way that it ended. It was quite beautiful, and I think this really just cemented Superman Lois being the perfect Arrowverse show. It literally hit all the points that was needed, and this bittersweet ending was something that people theorized about, but I didn't actually think they would actually go through with it, because at the end of the day I think this was the best ending for the show and for the Arrowverse, because it showed the utter humanity of Superman Lois, and that's been something throughout the whole show that has been evidently clear. It's the most humane show out of all the Arrowverse shows, and it truly understands emotion, and it uses it in such a good and effective way to affect the viewer, because I would be absolutely surprised if any of you watched that ending and didn't at least feel like you were going to cry, or if you were actually crying, or maybe you had this uncomfortable feeling in your throat, you know, all the ways that heartbreak gets to people. That's what we felt at the end of that episode. So if you do go on to enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos later this year. So I just want to emphasize before we get into this review and breakdown, we will be talking about the entire episode. It will be a bit of a longer video, but stick with me throughout it, because at the end of the day, this is the final review that I'll be doing for any Arrowverse show, because it's the end of an era. However, as I've been saying in recent videos, my channel is going nowhere. We're going to be uploading a lot of videos to do with other DC shows, other DC films like Superman, Supergirl, maybe the Green Lantern show, but also some potential spin-offs like the Smallville spin-off. So we're going to be doing more Superman Lois content later this week. Obviously we got to talk about everything that happened. There is so much that I will talk about in this review, and I'll break it down, but I need to break it down in further detail in the next couple of days. So stick with me, make sure those notifications are on so you don't miss anything. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the series finale of Superman Lois, officially the best Arrowverse show out there, in my opinion. Now, the episode starts quite modestly. It starts with Lana and John Henry, who are being honest with each other whilst they're on this date, and they barely been seeing each other enough, because obviously we all know John Henry is so busy. And this is when Doomsday's return happens, because the bar that they're in is absolutely destroyed as Doomsday smashes through whilst he is fighting Superman, and John Henry is injured at this point. Now, this is when we cut to properly seeing Doomsday fighting Superman, and the boys have to step in to help Superman, but he won't let them near the creature because he fears for their lives. He isn't sure that they are ready for this, but Lois shouts at Amanda in the streets of Smallville whilst this is happening for letting Lex unleash Doomsday on Smallville and causing havoc. So Doomsday and Superman continue to fight it out, and eventually Doomsday gets the better of Superman once again, and in an attempt to save their dad, the boys step in because Lois says you have to. This is the only way. And so they distract Doomsday with their heat vision and they fly off, and Doomsday follows them. So meanwhile, John Henry frantically gets a device from his workshop that is supposedly going to help when trying to stop Lex. And so him and Lana, they go to the workshop, nothing much more happens there. And so then they approach Superman and Lois, and they give them the idea of how to stop Doomsday. And with the help of John Henry's hammer, as Superman is used as bait, Superman takes on Doomsday and he is temporarily killed. And at this point, Superman takes him up to the sun so he doesn't heal, because we all know that the sun's energy is more than powerful enough to destroy basically any matter. And clearly he is not powered by the yellow sun, because inside Doomsday is Bizarro, who used to live on a world where they had a red sun. So Superman goes up there, he powers himself up, so he's in a better way. But it's at this point that everyone prepares for Lex coming to kill them after Doomsday is out of the picture, and you get this cool kind of tracking shot as the camera pans all around them, kind of like Tarantino style. I thought that was actually a really cool moment in the episode. And so it's at this point that we cut to Amanda in the car, and she is being called by Lex, and Lex tries to kill her. But luckily she is saved by the boys because they realize that Amanda is being targeted by Lex. And just after this, Lois tries to live stream Amanda exposing Lex, but that is stopped by Milton. So John Henry goes after him because Amanda gives him the information about where he is, so he goes with the DOD. Now let's talk about Doomsday's ending, because it was quite sad and melancholic seeing Doomsday / Bizarro go out in that way, where there's a moment of understanding between Superman and Doomsday as they look at each other, while we get a montage of flashbacks showing Bizarro's life before. And this really kind of made the way for what they were going to do for the ending of this episode, with the way that they leave Superman and Lois. So back on Earth, we got Lex, who attacks the boys in Smallville as Superman heals himself in the yellow sun radiation and comes flying down just afterwards. And Lex smashes Jonathan, and Jonathan is severely injured, and luckily later Jordan goes to him and gives him like super powered CPR, and he is brought back to life, thankfully. And just before this, there was a great moment between Lois and Lex, and obviously that rivalry has existed since the end of last season. It's been fierce, and they've never actually gone like face to face, but this is the first time they go face to face. And so Lois fries Lex's suit a bit with the device that John Henry gave her, as she tells him just before to confront her, not her sons, because it's Lois that Lex wants revenge on. And so after this, Superman returns and he takes Lex, he flies him up into the atmosphere, into the sky, and luckily for Lex, he has those kryptonite spikes that Milton put in the suit as an upgrade, and Superman is shot full of those kryptonite spikes, and he takes a while trying to get them out because it's really dug deep into his chest. And whilst this is happening, Milton is watching, and he is suddenly arrested by John Henry Irons and the DOD as John Henry slams his head down into the desk, and obviously forcing him to stop what he's doing and stop the hacks and everything, so that Lois can live stream and Lex is officially exposed to the world. So Superman defeats Lex in the sky as he harnesses his anger for Lex and all that he's done against him and his family, and obviously killing him, using Doomsday in the way that he used him. And that anger goes into some serious blows as he smashes Lex's suit open in the middle of the sky. And what a shot that was. I think this is one of the coolest shots in the entire series finale that is on the screen right now. And they bring him back to Smallville, where he is recorded just after they finish that live stream, and Superman is reunited with his family and Lex Luther is defeated. Now let's quickly talk about Lex. Was I happy with the way that Lex went out in this episode? I have to say it was maybe a bit quicker than I anticipated, and same with Doomsday, but I liked Doomsday's ending, and I think Lex's fight with Superman was actually quite good. Up in the sky, I thought it was a nice fight scene to kind of cap off their rivalry, but obviously Lex is never going to be as powerful as Superman, so it was never going to be a fair fight with Superman all juiced up on anger but also yellow sun radiation, so he really had the upper hand on him. And so with Lex defeated in the middle of Smallville, we cut to 1 year later, and that is crazy because they didn't even say 1 year later. It's just a line that is referenced, so you have to figure out for yourself, this is the future. So as we all theorized, there was flash forward scenes, and let me tell you what, there is a lot of flash forward scenes because this is 1 year later and we go a lot later in this episode. But the violin music plays and it kind of merges into the Superman Lois theme at one point as Lana gets married to John Henry. So that was a surprise. That's something that I wasn't expecting to happen in this episode, but it's a sweet scene. I like that Lois is officiating it as we get flashbacks emphasizing the heroics and the friendships shared between Lois, Clark, and Lana and John Henry, and the special moments and the hard moments that all those characters went through. So I realized at this point, I know what they're doing. they're doing this to wrap up the characters, to do the classic Superman Lois montage that works so well with music and a monologue over the top, which is obviously Lois in this case, and it worked really well, I have to say that. And we get this beautiful montage of the shots of John, Henry and Lana celebrating with their friends, their family, as they dance at their wedding. And so what kind of gave it away was that obviously this was a big time jump. They were barely dating earlier in the episode, and also Chrissy shows up and Kyle was there, and it turns out that they're having their third child. And I don't know if the first two were twins or not. I didn't really pick up on that. But Chrissy is expecting a third child. And so it's at this point that Lana comes into the picture. And obviously she has so much history with Kyle. Obviously they've been absolutely intrinsically linked since the start of the show, because they were married at the start, then they got divorced and there was all that drama. And now 1 year later, they are in a good place and they have this sweet moment together as they take to the stage, to the dancing stage, and have one final dance together. And I thought it was such a nice moment to wrap up their story in an actually nice way. Now let's talk about Jordan and Sarah, because Sarah comes back from Greece temporarily after a year abroad, and she talks about her future, her goals and everything, and she asks Jordan about his superheroics and what he is doing right now, and is he pleased with the way things are going, and Jordan says yes. And I feel like that was the first teaser of seeing more of Jordan as Superboy, which we'll talk about later in this video, because we get an epic shot later. So John, Henry and Natalie are the next people up as they talk about life on this earth and how she actually feels like this is home now, and she is adapted, and she obviously has a lot of friends, family here, and they really have created a good life for themselves over on this earth. And what follows is Clark and Lois as they sit down in their Kent family home, and Clark questions what Superman Lois will be remembered for. This was in the trailer where they say truth, justice, and Clark adds, and a better tomorrow, which is the new Superman phrase in the last couple of years. Obviously the original one was truth, justice, and the American way, but as I discussed previously, I prefer this slogan. I prefer truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, because that is truly what Superman stands for. He is a hero for everyone and not just Americans. And they talk about how they're going to get old together, which obviously we don't know if we're going to see at this point. And after this, we see Lex, who has denied his appeal, and he will be stuck in Strikers for a long time as Lois gets a notification on her phone. So that's great. Lex is defeated, Lois has won, Clark has won, and this time round he's not getting as nice treatment, because we cut to Strikers where we see that Bruno Mannheim is in charge of the prison now. So his time in prison is not going to be as good as the last time. And this is where we cut to what might be some of the best minutes in Superman Lois ever. And it is definitely the most sad, bittersweet, yet beautiful moment that we've had in the show. So this is Superman's monologue that starts just after the ad break. And he says he lived for 32 more years. And you know what you're getting at this point, because he's saying, I lived for 32 more years. So that means there is actually an endpoint for Superman. He will die, and we will be shown it. And so at this point you get documentary footage of a broken world, and you cut to the Superboys having new suits. Jordan and Jonathan suited up in this kind of weird moment in the fortress. I don't know if that's actually them or not, but it's kind of CGI. But you get to see their new suits, and it cuts to an amazing shot that obviously is purely for the fans, because you get to see the whole super family flying together in the sky. So in the middle you got Superman, you got Jordan and Jonathan as Superboy in their costumes, and you've got Steel and Natalie in the background in their comic accurate suits. Like, it's fairly comic accurate, and I have to say, what a shot. This had me going like, F yeah. I literally screamed out loud when this happened. And this cuts to an older looking Lois and Clark. Now, they never spent a day without each other for the rest of their lives after defeating Lex Luthor. That is what Clark says in his speech. And you get to see various shots of them being old and obviously everyone growing up, and Jordan and Jonathan grow up, have kids, they have wives. They look totally different because they've been played by different actors, older versions of themselves. Actually, this moment kind of reminded me of like Harry Potter, when an older looking Harry Potter, Hermione, Ron at the train station waiting for their kids to go to Hogwarts. But in this case, in Superman Lois, you see the boys and their kids, their wives, and Clark and Lois are there, they're old, but they're enjoying their time with their grandchildren. And it's such a joyful moment to see them actually having such a good time. But then we cut to the somber, to the sadness that obviously envelops everyone's lives, because Clark talks about Lois's final moments as her cancer came back. So we see Lois's final moments on this earth as Clark talks about how everything good in his life came from Lois. And it's just absolutely tore my heart to shreds. I'm sure it did to you guys. And Lois, in her final moments, sees her dad. As Clark starts crying and the boys are there to support him in such a dire moment as Lois dies. And it's so sad to see this, because obviously we've grown so attached to Lois throughout the course of this show. But also before that, Lois was introduced in Elseworlds. She was in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's how Bitsy became Lois Lane, and I have to say, she really killed it. She is Lois Lane to me. She is the #1 Lois in my eyes, and same with Clark right now. Superman Lois has been just such an insanely good show, and this whole ending of this episode absolutely tore everyone to shreds who was watching it. And so it was never the same afterwards. This is what Clark says as you see Jordan and Jonathan, who came by almost every day, but something was missing. His life was a bit empty despite having his sons and his grandchildren and the other people that surround him in his daily life. And this is where we get a cameo from the comics, and I think this might be the actual cameo. I could have missed something completely different in terms of casting and everything, but Krypto makes his debut on Superman Lois. Although it is just a normal dog, he hasn't got the power to fly. But it's such a sweet moment seeing Clark being happy once again, despite Lois being gone. It's a much needed companion for him as he goes about his daily life. But things go sideways as he walks through the streets of Smallville with his good friend Kyle, and Clark drops to the ground with a heart issue. However, he doesn't die at that point, but we do cut to when he does pass away, because Clark is back home with his family and they're right next to him as Clark dies, and we see his younger self rise from his body. And it's a great moment because you see him looking upon his old body as he walks through his home, as he sees the young versions of his sons, Jordan and Jonathan. You see their kids as Clark talks about hope, and then he sees Lex crying, he talks about forgiveness, and then you see Krypto and he talks about wonder. And then this leads to the most sad and beautiful moment of the entire show as he sees all of his friends and family, including the boys, as they open the door, and you see the love of his life, Lois Lane, in a beautiful red dress. It's such a sad but amazing moment to end the show on, and he says this, and I'm going to read it out because I thought it was really affecting and it really got through to me, and I had to write it down to mention it in this review and breakdown video because this is just so impactful, and I think this really encapsulates the humanity that Superman Lois showed and how smart and brilliant it was throughout its entire 4 seasons. So Clark says this: "I came into this world alone, but when I left it, I had so much. It was all because of love. It's the thing that makes life worth living. Do everything you can to find love, to give it, to hold on to it, because life, it goes by so fast." What a final speech. I mean, I expected something great from the series finale, but this ended on such a great note. Obviously an entirely bittersweet note because Clark is dead, Lois is dead, we're in the future, it's 32 years later. But the next generation goes on as Clark looks back at his past, as he finds solace in the afterlife by seeing the love of his life, by seeing his young sons, by seeing his friends and family and everyone like that, even Lex Luther, talking about forgiveness. It's such a beautiful moment as Clark beams with joy, smiling, kissing the love of his life, and that's where the show ends. That is the final scene of the show. It's so fitting, and I can't have asked for a better ending. So that pretty much does it for this video, guys. I really want to say thank you so much for all your support throughout Superman Lois, throughout me making videos on it. I've enjoyed the show so much, but I've also enjoyed covering it for you guys. It's my joy and privilege to do it, and same thing goes for the rest of the Arrowverse. Obviously, this does mark the end of the Arrowverse proper. Yes, it's not technically an Earth Prime show, but like Supergirl wasn't part of Earth 1 originally, Superman Lois is just on another Earth, and so to me, it's the end of the Arrowverse, and it's the end of a huge era that has defined a huge part of my life. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. Obviously, we renamed the channel recently to Ben's Take because I want to do more topics and more videos that are not just Arrowverse or DC related. I want to do other stuff that are comic book related because that's what the channel is at its core. It's my take on certain topics that you guys are interested in and I'm also interested in. So thank you guys so much for the support. I really can't say how great it's been since making this channel in 2016, starting with Supergirl, starting with The Flash, starting with Arrow, then moving to Legends of Tomorrow, then moving to shows like Batwoman, Stargirl, and all the content that we did over the years before eventually leading into 2021 when Superman Lois Season 1 premiered. And let me tell you what, it took the world by storm. It took me by storm. I was obsessed, and I'm still obsessed to this day. It's such a great show, and as I said earlier, it has become my favorite Arrowverse show of all time, despite loving Supergirl, despite loving The Flash, despite loving Arrow so much. They are some of my favorite shows ever. I had such great times with them, but the quality of Superman Lois just was far beyond any other CW Arrowverse show out there, and I think it just really connected and knew how to reach its audience in such a perfect way, delivering on the superhero moments but also delivering on those moments between the characters, and it really lived up to the name Superman and Lois. So that does it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it and if you've enjoyed all my Superman Lois content over the years, please be sure to leave a big fat like and a comment. Let me know what do you think about this series finale down in the comments below, and remember, we're going to have lots of videos out in the next couple of days talking about like Superboy, talking about the ending, talking about different things, and probably about the Arrowverse as well. And it goes without saying, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos, but for now you can click on the top right corner of the screen to watch my latest video, and I will catch you guys later. This is my final ever Arrowverse review. Can't believe I'm saying that. But with that said, I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.